Good evening, and we'd like to welcome everyone to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for the City of Warrenton for Thursday, December 7th, 2017. And our first order of business will be the minutes for the meeting of November 2, 2017.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Scott.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Cooper for approval of the minutes from November 2nd, 2017. Any discussion? All right, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Barton is absent. Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Gerloff?
Yes.
Mrs. Blondin is absent. Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
And I will abstain. I was absent from that meeting. And so our motion carries by a vote of 6-0 with one abstention, correct?
Yes.
All right. And now we will move on to item number 2, which is our Warrenton High School Alumni Cornhole Tournament, SCP number 32.
This is a approval request for the Warrenton High School Alumni Carnival Tournament Special Event Permit SCP-32. On November 22nd, Julie Myers submitted a special event permit approval request for the Warrenton High School Alumni Carnival Tournament event to be held at the Warren County Fairgrounds on February the 7th, 2018. And she is here if you have any specific questions for her.
All right. And if there are questions, then we'll ask Mrs. Myers to come to the podium to answer those. Mr. Deach, you're a former principal of the Warrenton High School. Do you have any questions?
No.
Do you have any observations about alumni of Warrenton High School?
None that I would repeat in the midst of this august assembly.
I don't see any concerns, so I would make a
February.
motion that we approve the cornhole tournament
Okay.
as submitted.
And I will second that.
All right, we have a motion by Warrenton High School alumnus. Are you an alumnus?
I am.
Alumnus, Mrs. Teresa Scott, and a second by former Warrenton High School principal, Mr. John Deach, to approve the tournament SCP number 32 request as submitted.
Scott, before you vote, actually Julie said it's April, not February. So it'd be April the 7th.
I knew that.
Okay. I had it wrote down as February.
Would have.
But her application clearly says February the 7th. Yes, it does.
Oh, the permit does, this doesn't.
That would be editorial privilege, would it?
Yes.
So we'll make the note.
We'll just
that-
approve it when she has it.
Yeah, we'll make, so we'll make the approval subject to the corrected date from Mr. Hand.
So moved.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Gerloff?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
All right. That motion passes 8-0 with 2 absences. And finally, our final item of the agenda tonight is the consideration of Dollar General Site Plan 109, which was tabled originally at the June 1, 2017 meeting. And we'll let Mr. Hanf now bring us up to date on this.
This is a site plan approval request for the proposed Dollar General SP 109 to be located at 513 North Highway 47. Property is zoned RC1 Planned Business District. Like you stated, it was tabled on June the 1st at the P&Z meeting, and the applicant representatives are here if you have any specific questions to the revised plans that they submitted.
All right, thank you. Just so that we can kind of bring everybody back to where we left off in June, we looked at the plan for Dollar General at that time, and some of the concerns that were brought had to do with cross-access and as well as some of the architectural design components. So if all of you now can remember that, let's go ahead and work through those issues and come to a conclusion.
Has the cross-access been addressed?
So I will give you guys some background about the cross-access. Dollar General has been great to work with on this. They submitted a draft of an agreement to basically negotiate a cross-access. There was some objections we had with that, just some of the general restrictions on it. They removed all those restrictions. I know they sent it, I know Kathy Kohimsky and her husband are here from Moment of Grace Florist. I know they reached out to them, and they did not want to sign the agreement at this time, if that's my understanding is correct, because they plan on being there for the business. But the cross-access agreement itself, I think, is consistent with industry standards. I think it's, really probably a good model for us to use working forward. I believe they're going to record an agreement to basically compel themselves in the future to negotiate a cross-access. So my recommendation with regards to the cross-access is that they provide cross-access upon development to the south in the form and the detail that they've provided with their proposed cross-access language. So we have enforcement mechanism at some point in the future to basically say, hey, you guys got to sit down and you got to enforce it. But I'm satisfied with the language of the document that they drafted. It's a pretty lengthy document. I don't know if you guys want to go through it. It's probably not worth it, but I think it anticipates, what you guys want to achieve in the future if the property to the south does develop. And Kathy, I don't know if you guys want to say anything about it, or if you guys have any input on the cross-access at all, or any questions?
I've seen the original agreement.
You haven't seen the revised one?
No.
We'll send that to you.
Yeah.
It removed that paragraph too that I'm sure you were concerned about.
That was a big concern, but there are other concerns within it as well, so.
What do you know? Did you not send that?
It sounded like they had us paying for a lot of
Well,
it and insuring it.
Well, can we ask?
Could you step to the
We're
podium?
happy to have your comments, but where you sit, we won't be able to hear you on the public record, so if you could come to the podium, we'd appreciate it.
it did, I think the comment was it had you guys paying for some of the improvements and the maintenance and insurance for it.
Right, it was
And-
like we're responsible for the whole thing.
Well, and the same thing, it would be basically a cross-access that would go both ways. Really, what they have as a document is an agreement to negotiate a cross-access. So those would be terms, although those are in the document, those would be terms that would be negotiated. The only thing I'm concerned with myself is the actual cross-access, and that we have some condition for enforcement in the future, and I'm fine with the language of the cross-access. You guys are not bound by the terms of that agreement because you didn't sign the cross-access. What we suggested to them was, why don't you approach your neighboring property owner and see if you can work on an agreement. You can't work out an agreement, that's fine, because you guys don't know what you're going to do or what the future of the property is going to be. But as far as being comfortable with the cross-access that they've proposed, from a city perspective, I'm comfortable to a point. Then it becomes between the property owners, basically, to work out something that's mutually agreeable. So I'm satisfied with regards to the fact that as far as we can address future cross-access, I think the document they submitted is consistent. You guys would obviously, if somebody came in and you redeveloped your property, then you would be required to grant them cross-access. So then that would be the other side of it. There would be some give and take with regards to the cross-access itself. So my recommendation from your perspective is they've discussed it. They've got a document they're going to record. The only thing I want to make sure from a city perspective is there's just a condition of the site plan approval that says to provide cross-access to the property to the south upon development or upon redevelopment of that property. And that's it. And then there's a framework in place. I'm comfortable with the framework. I'm comfortable with the language.
And does the language, and I obviously don't know how it's structured, but does the language say that that has to be at a reasonable cost to?
I will tell you, if they come in and they develop their property, we're going to put the same condition to provide Dollar General cross-access. So they're both at basically a position where their developments both require cross-access. I will tell you, in my experience, that generally resolves itself because they come up with a mutually agreeable decision with regards to how that maintenance and that cross-access is done. I don't believe it's appropriate for us to get into the specific details of the maintenance and construction or whatnot, because really that's between the two property owners upon development.
But they couldn't say, we're not going to give you that access unless you pay us some
They
exorbitant
couldn't,
amount
because
of
that's why
money.
we're going to put that condition on there. And, essentially, there's not a purchase of the cross-access contemplated in the final draft of the document. There is requiring them to do some portion of construction of it, which is the property, the portion that goes up to the property line, and also insurance and maintenance responsibilities to be shared costs. In the same way that as they're required to grant them cross-access, there's going to be insurance and maintenance responsibilities that they're going to have to negotiate. That's going to be a condition. So, my experience is that works itself out because they're both conditions and they typically come together on those details. The biggest concern from a city perspective, because essentially that's why we recommended to Dollar General, why don't you try to work it out now? They're not comfortable trying to work that out right now, and I completely understand that because they have a thriving business along Highway 47. They don't have a desire really to look at the cross-access right now or to try to negotiate it to kind of put that to bed. So we have to go to the next best thing, which is for them to propose a cross-access document that's reasonable. From a city perspective, our concern were some of the responsibilities and also some of the restrictions in granting cross-access that we thought was inappropriate as to what they could use on their property. So that's the only thing I can really do in looking at the document is to say from a city perspective, I don't think that this is okay. As far as maintenance, insurance, those are typical things when you get into cross-access between two businesses or two developments that they work out between the two of them, and it's really a private party negotiation. So because they're not comfortable negotiating right now, the only thing I think we can really do as a city is put an enforcement requirement on the site plan, and which we've let Dollar General know that we're going to do, and also to basically say we're comfortable with the framework of this and put that in the minutes that the way this, from a city perspective, the way this cross-access is designed under the document that you're proposing, we're fine with as an approved cross-access.
So basically, if something were to develop there and that access were needed, they would have to work with the adjoining property or they would be in violation of
That's right.
their conditional use.
And just why, like on their property, if somebody developed it, they're going to have to work with the property owner, with Dollar General, to provide cross-access. And so that kind of fundamentally, the idea of getting it now so that it's not in a position where they come and develop and now we say, well, there needs to be a cross-access here, and they have to go to Dollar General and they have to try to purchase that cross-access, which may or may not happen, and we can't force that issue.
That answers my question.
Dollar General said they will not negotiate. They don't negotiate.
Right.
So
They told our attorney.
that's what they told Dollar General.
Well, I think this still has to go to the Board of Aldermen. So if you want to try to negotiate it now, you still have time to negotiate it. I will tell you, the items that I saw within the cross-access agreement that I said, we said that these are the things that, these use restrictions, and I wish you had an opportunity to see the document as it stands now. The use restrictions that are within there, they've completely struck all those from the agreement. And I told them that I couldn't say that this document is fine with me with those restrictions, and from a city perspective, because staff felt like it was unfair to your property to say you can't have a Walmart type property or whatnot, and they agreed to remove all that. And that's pretty much as far as from a city perspective we could take it. I kind of gave them my edits in an email. They reviewed it, and then we had a conference call, and they're like, "That's fine, we'll take that out."
So this is truly a document for the future then?
100%.
Should we decide to sell and, go with the development that's happening on 47, then the person who purchases has to know and understand that easement is in place.
It's not an easement, because you guys won't sign, it's not a cross-access easement. What they're gonna record is basically a restriction on their property that is basically gonna bind them to negotiate a cross-access easement. And we're going to have a very broad enforcement condition that says, provide cross-access to the property to the south upon redevelopment of the property to the south. So we have an ability to come back and say, you know, hey, look, you are required to do this, they're redeveloping it. And by the way, you guys, the purchaser of your property, is required to provide a cross-access easement that we think will facilitate ultimately the goal of having that cross-access to the south. So, and like I said, I think I got the initial reaction, well, this is what Dollar General does. And the way I understand it is, it was not really like Dollar General doesn't negotiate. I don't want to speak for Dollar General, but it had to go, these are developers for Dollar General. This is typically what we do. It had to go up the food chain, back down the food chain, and they approved it for this particular, you know, circumstance.
But it's nothing.
And Mrs. Skoyansky, if, we want to make sure your comments are on the record.
They don't have the
We want
right
hear
to
you from the crowd.
cross-access on your property today.
Okay.
It's basically a recorded agreement to negotiate a future cross-access. And Dollar General's here if I have misstated any of that information.
That's accurate.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm comfortable with the easement language. It's pretty much standard, I think. And then the maintenance and construction stuff, you know, because quite honestly, if you sell your property and somebody comes in and does it, it's just going to be a cost of redevelopment is to do the construction and, you know, insurance, because I'm sure they have insurance and, you know, it would be then vice versa required.
So whoever buys our property would have to negotiate with Dollar General?
Yes, yes, yeah. And it's really,
So we couldn't sell our property without that negotiation?
no, you can sell your property today. It's just to develop your property for a new use, if you're going to take the building down. They don't have a right to drive across your front yard into your building. That's not there. That's not a recorded cross-access. It's a requirement of the site plan to have a cross-access, and they've recorded a document that's basically binding whoever owns that property when there's a redevelopment to the south to negotiate a cross-access with you guys. You know, and there's some flexibility in the terms of it. Some of the stuff is, I would say, somewhat draconian, but you know, typically that's pretty standard when you get, you know, two companies together. But from a city perspective, eliminating those use restrictions was one of the main goals. I don't think we cared about some of the maybe more noxious uses that were in there. We were like, well, there was like a Bali house, and I don't even know what that was. That
We had a lot of them. So
yeah, but the ones that
they let
were.
some of them in, is what you're saying?
Well, no. I was just trying to be funny.
I mean, they had car wash, they had all kinds of.
That entire paragraph too is, and I'm going to ask Jack after the meeting tomorrow, to email that document to you guys so you got a chance to look at it, and then we'll, you know, if you have comments, you can come back to us, or your attorney has comments, to you know, come back to us. But there is nothing recorded on your property, no restrictions being put on your property. The city can't do that because your property's not here for redevelopment. So we're not affecting your property at all. It's just, really, I think it's for the future development, if that's a commercial development, that somebody buys your property and wants to develop it commercially, it's going to provide better traffic flow. And we kind of talked about that before we started the meeting. So it's a condition, Teresa. That's what I'm asking for.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for those comments. We have other questions or comments? I know Mr. Gerloff had raised the issue at our first discussion of the architectural design, and I think brought up some good points about consistency in the district, as well as the parapet walls and things of that nature to conceal any of the mechanicals on the roof.
Yes.
And they've revised their submittal from a metal building to a full brick building.
Looks much better.
Looks much better.
Now, is the parapet wall is tall enough that it will hide the rooftop units?
I'm sorry. My name's Mark Bush.
And please approach the podium if you would, please.
My name's Mark Bush. I represent the developer, Capital Growth Buckalter, and we did the height of the parapet walls. We actually raised on one side, and we have a diagram showing a line of sight. We didn't have it earlier to include in the packet, but I can illustrate that. We took from every angle from the front of the building all the way across 47.
Good.
So you can't see the AC units there. and we took from the side of the building to the property line where the florist is.
Okay.
Well, but this is from the front of the building. From the farthest property line over here, this is the line of sight is 100 feet. And this is the line of sight, this is the AC units, right here.
Okay.
And this is the property line over on this side, on the left side of the building. Obviously, you can't see there. But the greatest concern was, this is the front of the building, and this is all the way on the other side of 47, and that's 200 feet. And that line of sight is above the AC units.
Okay.
So
Very good.
And it looks to me like the roof pitch, instead of running front to back, apparently runs from right to left.
If you're looking at the building, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or concerns about the architectural design and the changes that they've made?
Is that the color of the brick that you're going to use, is what's shown?
Yes, there's two different types of brick. This is a split face block,
Correct.
and then this is brick. And that is a painted brick there to maintain those colors. One other addition that we didn't have on earlier is that we added the decorative coping on the top.
Okay.
I don't know if that, because it's the same color as the parapet, if that stood out. But yeah, we took all the comments to heart, and hopefully we feel like we've addressed them.
Very good. I'm happy.
Mr. Gerloff is pleased, that's good. But, you know, his initial comments, I think, were actually good comments for the district. And it's important that we try to maintain some degree of consistency across all of those commercial properties.
Yeah, but we want to be good neighbors. So.
We appreciate that. Any other questions or comments regarding the question?
The only other thing that was addressed, and I didn't really have a feeling about one way or the other, was the trucks unloading at certain times because of the size of the lot. And I don't know if that's an issue or if it's not an issue, but it did come up in the prior discussion.
So the initial concern was that in order for a delivery truck, a full semi 18-wheeler
Right.
to get on premises would likely require the truck to actually come to a full stop on 47 and back into the property.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Joshua Blinsky with Call Valley Engineering. We ran some models of the trucks. If you could bring up the site plan here. They will not have to back.
Can you
into
take the
site.
other picture down?
Sure.
And speak loudly since you're away from the microphone, if you could, please.
Actually,
Is it not in that set?
let's see. I have it free.
Okay.
I'll explain it. I have some 11 by 17 copies that I can. So we ran the truck pattern in and out of the site so you can see what the path would take. So if you want to pass those. So there's two paths of the truck. One from the south to the north. Starting into the site and then back into the loading zone.
I don't know, has he got enough for all of us?
So there won't be any disruption cut on the street.
I can share.
So understanding your comment, what you're saying is that a delivery truck, a full semi, would actually be able to pull into the parking area and without coming to a stop on 47, so that the loading and unloading could occur fully on the premises for the development.
All maneuvers are enclosed in our property. Yes.
And it doesn't look like it, even if there's a truck sitting there, there may be some parking sites blocked, but not many.
Not very many, but they were able to pull back at an angle to leave most of that parking
Yeah,
accessible.
see them.
Okay. And, no one at home can see these diagrams, but I think they do fairly well detail that a full semi-rig can get on premises and back into the unloading zone without disrupting traffic on 47. Would anybody feel differently?
I'm glad I answered the question though, because they were prepared to answer.
They were.
I'm glad we were prepared to answer.
Any other questions or other unresolved issues for any of you?
I would just like to ask if the Kohanskis are satisfied with the response thus far.
As long as it doesn't affect our property today and impede a sale down the road, then I would say, it's not a cross-access that's in place. It's the idea.
It is
that-
not a cross-access that's in place. In fact, the condition I'm recommending is provide cross-access to the property to the south upon redevelopment. And in our minutes are, the fact that I'm fine with the cross-access document that is in their agreement to negotiate a cross-access. The only restriction that's put on is on their zoning is on their property, not yours at all. There's nothing recorded. They can't record anything with regards to your property.
So should we decide to sell, and the people maintain it as a flower shop, say, and then they keep the business going?
It'll never trigger, if they
Okay.
keep it as a flower shop or whatnot, it'll be, redevelopment would be, they put a new building, they put a strip mall there or something
Then,
like that.
okay.
Yep. And that,
That
I mean,
answers-
honestly, that would be something that would be rolled into the engineering and the design and the redevelopment costs.
Just go with and.
Yeah, just, I mean, it's speculative, it's, would
Absolutely.
it ever redevelop? But if it's there for safety reasons, the city wants to make sure that there's an ability to open that avenue up.
Okay, then yes, I'm fine.
All right. So, so we've been able to discuss the cross-access agreement, been able to discuss the design elements and architecture and the loading and unloading. Does anyone have other questions or concerns on the matter?
Kind of like to see the way they did, they moved the greenery, the bushes and trees around. I see here on the one display that they have moved them all around the building, not just left them all in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like what I see of it.
And that was a specific comment too during the previous
It
meeting.
was.
The landscaping on all four sides of the building.
Good job.
So we can talk more, or if anyone feels like we're at a conclusion, then we can entertain a motion.
I'll entertain a motion, we accept the project.
With the condition.
With the conditions of, as stated by
I
attorney.
second that.
Second from Mr. Gerloff. Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Durbin and a second by Mr. Gerloff to recommend approval of Site Plan 109 for Dollar General based on the conditions of allowing the cross-access agreement that has been discussed by Mr. Gerville. In addition, with the changes in the elevation plans for the architectural design, and finally with the changes in the parking configuration to allow delivery and pickup. Any other conditions that I missed? All right, then we will consider the matter on hand based on those conditions and ask for a roll call vote.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Gerloff?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Deitch?
Yes.
Mr. Cullen?
Yes.
All right. And that motion passes 8-0 with 2 absences or vacancies. And it will come before the Board of Aldermen for their meeting on
December 19th.
Tuesday, December 19th. And for the Kohanskis or anyone else that has interest in this question, we'd encourage you to be here for that. That is the last item on our agenda, so we will now close the meeting and ask Mr. Hanf if there's anything that he has to report.
I would just like to say thank the Plain Zoning Commission. We had a busy year, We reviewed and approved, or we've reviewed for approval 42 different items, 9 text amendments, 10 site plans, 8 conditional use permit, 4 subdivision plats, 10 special event permits, and 1 variance. Thank you guys for working with me and helping the city.
We appreciate what you do. And we also appreciate what your staff does. Absolutely.
That's it. Thank you.
Anyone have anything for Mr. Hand?
How many
All-
housing starts do we have in 2017?
I think right now we're on 13 or 14. We've had a couple more applications submitted. They're fine tuning their plot plans, but we should get at least 1, if not 2 more this year.
Thank you.
All right.
Sounds good. Moving in the right direction.
It's better than
Up from
the...
3 the year before.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's certainly an improvement, so. Any other items of concern? All right, then we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
By Mr. Deach, seconded by Mrs. Scott. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.